Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. In today's podcast episode, I am talking to the lovely Lauren Brown from Stutter Free Kids. Lauren is a paediatric speech pathologist, childhood stuttering specialist, and the founder of Stutter Free Kids, where she offers online appointments and support to kids who are struggling or challenged with stuttering. And over the 12 years of supporting families to help their children speak stutter-free, using the Lidcombe Program, Lauren noticed a pattern in the children that she was working with. She noticed that the vast majority of children that she saw for stuttering were consistently impacted by their internal and their external environment, and it was negatively impacting the success of treatment. And so now she's developed a unique approach to helping kids speak stutter free, with, really a holistic approach using the healing power of play, connection, brain care, and managing sensitivity and overload to ensure the success of stuttering treatment. Our conversation was really interesting. I learned a lot about stuttering. I loved Lauren's holistic approach. And we talk a lot about sensitive children, highly sensitive children, because she noticed, as I was just saying, that the vast majority of kids that have struggles with stuttering are highly sensitive. So it's really important to address that in her therapy as well. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Lauren. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Natural Super Kids podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to Lauren today. Hello, Lauren. Thanks for coming on.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So can you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be doing what you're doing today?
Okay, so I'm Lauren. I'm a paediatric speech pathologist and I specialise in stuttering, childhood stuttering in particular. I'm also the owner of Stutter Free Kids, which is an online telehealth private practice specifically for stuttering support. I've been working for, I think it's like getting on close to 14 years now. And but I've only been specialising in stuttering for the last 5. I've always worked with stuttering, but it's been the last 5 that I've really, solely worked on stuttering therapy. But I work a little bit differently to most other speech therapists in the stuttering field because I tend to take a very holistic, whole child approach to stuttering therapy. So in particular, I look for the importance of temperament on stuttering, as a really high portion of children who stutter tend to have a more sensitive temperament or are considered highly sensitive children.
And I just came across you on Instagram, I was saying before we started recording, and that's what really drew me to you, is that holistic approach, because that's what we're all about here at Natural Super Kids. So, and I also was saying that I don't know a lot about stuttering, so I'm really interested to learn from you as well. Can we start by, I just want to ask you, what are some of the key things that would be helpful for parents to know about stuttering?
Yeah, so for most parents, it's not something that they really have ever had much exposure to until their child starts stuttering. For a lot of kids, it even can happen in one day. They can go from, one day being completely fluent in their speech to the next day waking up with a stutter. So it is a condition that tends to create a bit of anxiety and stress in parents because it tends to develop after very normal language. And it tends to happen in those preschool years, mostly between sort of 2 to sometimes up to 5 would be the typical onset time. But that's generally associated with the fact that that's the time where language is exploding. where we're going from, more simple 1 and 2 word phrases to often jumping into big, more complex sentences. So it has a really strong correlation between that language development and when complexity is sort of coming into the mix, because stuttering and complexity are very linked. So anything that overloads a child's system is likely to create more stuttering, which is where that sensitivity and temperament comes into it. So not every stutter that starts is going to be a stutter that needs to be treated. If you walked into any preschool or kindy, you're probably going to hear a vast majority of preschoolers are making simple repetitions in their words. Things like, where is my car? Or my mum said this. And we hear these little repetitions, and they're pretty typical. And, there's a portion of those that won't ever develop into anything more than that. And as that language development grows, that will just fade away. But there is another portion of children who will actually continue on with that disfluency and will often get worse over time, and that without input, without speech therapy, that can go on lifelong and can result in some pretty significant lifelong implications. And, the research around lifelong sort of impacts of stuttering can be pretty significant. If you can imagine, anything that disrupts our ability to communicate freely has an impact on, our relationships, on our self-esteem, on, how the types of jobs that we might go for, can impact everything, all the way through to, significant mental health. So it's a really important area that we're aware of, because we have a really lovely little window of opportunity in these early childhood years where we can treat stuttering really, really effectively. And for a lot of kids, make it that they don't have to deal with those lifelong implications where the stutter can actually go away. And a lot of children won't ever know that they were even treated for stuttering.
Yeah, so it sounds like that sort of early intervention is key.
Absolutely, yes. I think in most paediatric fields, that early intervention is really what we're looking for. And I've worked with children as young as sort of 2 years, which you think, oh gosh, you couldn't do anything with that, but yes, you absolutely can. And all the way up until sort of those late sort of tween years, like 10, 11, even up to 12 sometimes, can be still within the range of where we can get rid of that stutter. After that point, after that, that window has closed, stuttering can always be addressed and supported and improved quite significantly. And some children are still able to, with the right support, go on to not need ongoing intervention. But it is a lot harder, and it does require a different approach, and that the child is actually supported to be able to modify the way they speak. So it's a lot more intensive and cognitively difficult for the child once we miss that little window of opportunity in early childhood.
Yeah. Okay. That's really great to know. And you said before that your approach is a little different, a little unique. Can you tell us a little bit more about your approach to helping children speak stutter-free?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I've been working with children who stutter for a really long time, and using the Australian Lidcombe Program. And part of that program is that we keep a daily rating scale. The parents keep a daily rating scale on the severity that they're hearing for their child's stutter on that day. And then they bring that with them to their session, and we look over it together, and we end up with this lovely little graph over time. And over time, when you start to notice, okay, there's certain patterns in this disfluency, I started getting parents to kind of write down and note down, okay, what was happening when the numbers were going higher? What was happening when the numbers were going lower? And this was many years ago, but I started to notice there's these patterns where it was certain things like, oh, it was a birthday party and they were really exhausted and they ate all this sugar and then they didn't have a sleep. And then grandma came to visit, and, these layered events of things that were looking like traits of sensitivity and, particularly of being overstimulated or overloaded. And I had always worked in stuttering, but I hadn't really delved into much of the research. So then I started to get curious and dived in and found there's actually a lot of information out there that links stuttering with temperament and with regulation, and how sensitive the child's temperament is has a very big impact on their outcomes with stuttering. And I'm highly sensitive myself. I'd known that for years. And so as soon as I started looking at that, I started bringing in the, highly sensitive child tests and testing my clients. And, this one study in particular looked at, around 85% of stuttering clients were highly sensitive. And my numbers were equal to that, if not sometimes a bit higher, more like 90% of the kids that I was seeing for stuttering were also highly sensitive. And high sensitivity is also something that a lot of people don't really understand or know much about. And because it is, generally speaking, only around 20 to 30% of the population, so it is a minority of people. So we're not really exposed to what that means. And I think sensitivity has this sort of, negative connotation for a lot of people. Don't be so sensitive, it's not necessarily a good thing. Yeah, that's it. But high sensitivity, when we're talking about it in this sort of psychological term, it dictates how a nervous system is taking on information. So a highly sensitive nervous system is more attuned to its environment. So it's going to hear that noise that the other person might not hear. It's going to feel the scratchy tag on the back of the clothing. It's going to smell a new smell that, might not be a food that they've eaten before, and they're going to go, that's not happening, or get overloaded by a busy environment or by a loud noise, or an environment with lots of visual clutter or lights or things going on. So, and then that's just the physical world. And then we look into the emotions, where there's a higher level of empathy and a higher level of emotional reactiveness, and, often an ability to be able to sort of perceive what the people that are around them are feeling and experiencing and take on those emotions. So we have so many points within a highly sensitive nervous system where overload is likely. And anytime we have overload in a system that has stuttering, we're going to see more stuttering. And so the two correlate, very, very easily. But it also means we have to be really, really aware if a child is highly sensitive of what's happening in their whole environment, so that we can actually reduce down those triggers that are making the stuttering worse all the time, so that the treatment can actually work more effectively.
Yes. And it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, like you said, it's that overloaded kind of brain, and those sensitive kids get that more easily, don't they, from their environment?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're more sensitive to everything, more sensitive to chemicals, more sensitive to, more likely to have food sensitivities. They're more likely to have skin sensitivities, or, react to, the laundry detergent, or, whatever it might be. It's not just one thing. It is across the board a more sensitive physical, emotional experience with the world.
Yes. And I'm guessing, these kids probably have higher rates of anxiety. They're probably quite commonly fussy eaters, which is something that we talk about a lot at Natural Super Kids because of that sensitivity. So, yeah, really interesting that it's all very, very intertwined.
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how can we tell if our kids are highly sensitive? I mean, from a parent's perspective, I think we probably, parents probably have an inkling, but is there actually a way to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So Elaine Aron is the author of the book, The Highly Sensitive Person and the Highly Sensitive Child. She's got a number of just free little, tick and flick type questionnaires that you can do. There's actually one linked on my website for the highly sensitive child. Lots of other people have also come up with their own high sensitivity tests over the years, but I like hers. But I think also once we start talking about high sensitivity, if you've got a highly sensitive child at home, you've probably already been nodding along with, oh yeah, the scratchy tag. Oh yeah, they don't like wearing shoes. Oh yeah, when their hands are sticky, they don't like that either. Or, they didn't like it when we surprised them for their birthday. Or we start to get this like rolling cascade of nodding. Yes, 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 yes. But there's a little acronym that I like, which is a really simple way, and it's DOES, DOES. D is for depth of processing. So highly sensitive children tend to process information more thoroughly. They take longer to sort of warm up to new experiences. They're the ones that, they watch something or hear something on the radio, and then an hour later they go, Mum, what does that mean? And they've been mulling it over that whole time. There's overstimulation, which is what we've already sort of been speaking about with their whole environment, whether it's sensory or whether it's physical or whether it's emotional, or, we've got all of those ways of being overstimulated. Then the E is for emotional responsiveness and empathy. So these kids tend to be the ones that will, watch a Disney film and not want to watch from halfway through once the scary or the sad scenes start. Or they're the ones that are more likely to notice that, mum comes home or mum looks a bit upset, mum's angry or mum's sad, or there's something going on in their environment that they're picking up. And then the last one is S, which is sensitive to subtle stimuli. So that's noticing the things that other people don't necessarily notice or other kids wouldn't pay attention to. And that can be within their own system, things like the scratchy tag, or it could be like, oh, you've got new tires on your car, that sort of thing. You're like, oh, I wouldn't expect you to notice that. They are more perceptive to their environment in general.
Yeah, I think that's really, that's great. That's a really practical acronym that parents can go through. And I'll be sure to link that little test from your website in the show notes if anyone's interested in having a look at that as well. And so, when it comes to stuttering, like you said, there's that kind of, I guess, that range that's a little bit normal in preschool that maybe don't go on to having long-term issues and don't really need any sort of treatment or support. So when should a parent reach out for support with stuttering? Like, when's the right time?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the general red flags that, I'll list, but the very first one is if you're worried, if you're distressed, because often it happens very quickly and there's a very sudden from 0 to 1,000 with a stutter turning up. And I don't think that parents should just sit around being worried and, stressing and having anxiety, and because it's going to be exposed every single time your child speaks. And, how you're responding and reacting to your child, especially if they're sensitive, every time they speak, if they're seeing you tense up and, and see that worried look on your face every single time, far better to reach out on day one than to wait, and any, block of time to reach out to somebody to kind of get that reassurance, just even from a factor of, getting a bit of information to understand it better. If your child's been stuttering for a while and you're not really worried about it, there's, the general red flags we look for, which is, a stutter being present for more than 6 months. Family history is a really big one. So it's a very genetic, based condition. So if there is anybody in the family that has a stutter, it's a very good idea to get that looked at straight away, because there's a very limited chance that stuff's going to go away on its own if we've got a family history. And it can be even, grandpa's uncle, it can be really far back. And it is often more common with boys. And so ask the dads, ask the grandpas, go back in the male lines. They're the ones that often didn't talk about it and won't talk about it until you ask the question. So it's often good to ask. Other ones to look at would be a more significant stuttering behaviours. So the ones I sort of, imitated at the beginning, where it's like, where's my car? Where it's a very simple little repetition of a phrase, like where's my, versus a sound getting stuck with where's my car, where it's a smaller portion of that word. Or sometimes that sound might get stretched out, like where's my car? And then sometimes no sound will come out at all, and that sound actually gets blocked, and you can see a child actually holding their breath or getting really physically stressed with trying to get a word out. So anytime you see anything where it looks like there's a lot of physical distress there or emotional distress there to get that word out, definitely that would be a time to make the call. And the other one would be if the stutter is impacting the message. So for some kids, they might have a lot of stuttering going on, but you can still get everything that they're saying. It's not impacting the message. They're not giving up. You can follow it. A stranger can follow what they're saying. But if that stutter becomes the most dominant part of their conversation, where you're actually starting to struggle to really follow what they're telling you, or you can see they're actually changing what they're going to tell you because that was too hard, or they're giving up and going, oh, don't worry about it. Anytime that message isn't anymore coming through with clarity and ease, definitely time to jump in and speak to somebody, because we want kids to have a positive experience of communication, and we want it to be that what they have to say is the most important part, not how they're saying it.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that. I mean, it's just a matter of like sort of reaching out for support if you're unsure, like your first point, if you're at all worried or anxious, because I I'm just imagining there's a lot of shame, maybe like in past generations as well, when you were saying, it's more common in the male sort of side, and whether that grandpa's uncle stuttered, it might not be that obvious. It might not be something that you talk about. And that just made me think, like, if your child starts to stutter, like, I guess our reaction to that is really important as parents. Have you got any sort of tips there while people are sort of waiting to get support?
Absolutely. And I think that is the other difficult part is the waiting lists are really long, and getting support straight away can be difficult. And we spoke about it before we started recording, but I'm creating a program at the moment specifically for that, to have access to support from day one if parents are looking for it, because it can be hard to access it immediately. But there are little strategies you can do, that are going to help regardless. Especially for a sensitive child is, if you think your child is highly sensitive and they're stuttering, have a look at their environment, seeing if they're stuttering and you're in the car and you've got siblings who are talking and the radio's on and the dog's barking, see what you can tone down. Can you turn the radio off? Can you ask an older sibling to hold on a second while we let the little one say something? Looking at where we can reduce that overload, or, especially noise overload, turning TVs off, turning radios down, but then also if a child is, stuttering and they're trying to get your attention and there's competing forces from other people, seeing where you can kind of, create an environment where one can wait and the other one can have their turn, and we can kind of slow that whole communication process down. Getting down to a child's level, making sure they can see your face, slowing your own rate of speech can be really good. We all speak so quickly. So anything you can do that's going to simplify that system of communication is going to be a helpful thing for a child who's stuttering. And we just want to make sure we avoid anything that goes into the criticizing basket of, say it again or stop that, or, just take a breath, because it's not something kids are doing on purpose and it's not something they can control. So we want to try and reduce their stress and reduce their overload, and asking them to do anything like say it again or stop or take a breath or just get it out or anything like that is going to increase that, that stress and that overload.
Yeah, that's a great tip, and really important to know that it's not something they're doing on purpose. So we've got to be, patient and reduce that stress load and that sensory load. So good. And I just love that you're creating a program, because it's something that, as you said, you don't want to wait too long to get support with. But if it's going to be taking 6 months to get in to see someone about it, that could really interfere with that window of time. So tell us more. I know you're sort of in the process of creating the program, but tell us more about where we can find more out about you and your services and this new program that you're creating.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is probably the easiest place to find that information. So it's stutterfreekids.com. At the moment, I have a little wait list capture form on there, so you can put your email down if you're interested in the program. It is called Fluency Foundations. So it is really about all of those foundational needs that are, important when a child is stuttering, whether they're in current speech therapy or whether you're on a wait list or whether you're in that wait and see period where it hasn't been 6 months yet. And often therapists won't see a child before it's been 6 months, but there's a big opportunity there for those children to be supported and to be, boosting the foundations of that fluency, really. So that's probably the best place to go, website for both of that, the information about me and the wait list. And then I'm also on Instagram at Stutter Free Kids. So pretty simple, same name everywhere.
Yes, you've made it nice and easy for people to find you. And we'll be sure to link up your website and your Instagram in the show notes. So if anyone, wants an easy way to find Lauren, they can just come over to the show notes and we'll have everything linked there. And that little test will link in as well. And as I said, I found you on Instagram, so you make it fun. You're doing reels like I am. So I think you're getting some, like, people can come and just have a look at what you're doing over on Instagram and get some really great tips as well.
Absolutely. And that is a really big part of, what I do, as well as I, am always advocating and wanting to educate, regardless of, how anybody else can access my information. It's just nice to be able to have free content available for people because, there's people all over the world that contact and, don't always have the opportunity to see one-on-one. So it's a great platform for education.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about technology, isn't it? You can sort of get your message out and your wisdom and your knowledge out to people, far and wide. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Thanks so much. It's been great to be here.
See you later. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.